Hi, I'm so glad you're here. We are going to have a Sunday school lesson today with a read aloud from a book called Jack and Jim by Kitty Crowther. Jack had always dreamed of seeing the world. Most of all, he longed to fly over the sea, so blue and wide. So one sunny day, he decided to cross the forest and then the hills. And on the other side of the hills, he found the sea. Jack was preparing to take off and soar out over the gleaming water when he noticed something sticking up from behind a rock. Could that be? Whose feet are those? He wondered out loud. How do you do? Said a seagull. My name is Jim. I'm Jack, said Jack shyly. Are you a real seabird? Jim laughed. Of course. Would you like to see where I live? Jack had never been so excited. He and Jim flew together all day, and at the end of the day they landed exhausted on a little island and talked as the sun fell into the ocean and the stars began to twinkle in the sky. Very early in the morning, Jim sneaked away to gather some supplies, and when he returned, Jack was still fast asleep. They shared a breakfast of tea and fish. Jack ate one fish, decided he preferred the tea. After breakfast, they flew to Jim's village. What an amazing place! Seagulls hustled and bustled about. So different from the forest, thought Jack. After they explored the town for a while, a strange feeling came over Jack. Why is everyone staring at me, Jim? It must be the first time they've ever seen a blackbird, said Jim. I guess they're curious about you. Still, Jack seemed unsure. Jim thought for a moment. Then he said, Why don't I show you my home? Here it is, my very own place. I built it myself. Jim beamed with pride. At night, you can hear the waves. It's just like being on a boat. Inside, they sat down and talked, each with a cup of hot cocoa. They settled down for the night, and Jim fell asleep right away. But Jack was wide awake. He was thinking about what a wonderful day he had had with his new friend. It wasn't until the sun began to peek up over the water that he fell asleep, smiling. The next morning, Jack and Jim ventured back into the village. The port was teeming with activity. Who's that funny bird? Asked old Captain Seagull. His name is Jack. He's a blackbird, answered Jim. He lives in the forest on the other side of the sea. Jack is my friend. But the seagulls didn't like the blackbird. I'd better go back home, said Jack quietly. No, you won't, Jim was furious. If that's the way things are, we won't come to the village anymore. And he led his friend away. The next day they went fishing, and Jim tried to cheer his friend up. Don't worry, Jack. They'll come around soon. But Jack was still sad. And if they don't, I'll come to your place, Jim said. Jack smiled. Jim truly was his friend. The next day, Jim took Jack to visit a nearby forest of fir trees. Jack was thrilled to feel so at home. He spent the day teaching Jim all about the forest. Jack was happy that Jim liked his home too. Late that afternoon, back at Jim's house, Jack discovered a chest filled with books. I found it washed up on the beach, explained Jim. What luck! Jack was delighted. Have you read any of them yet? What? Asked Jim, puzzled. I can't read. No one in the village can read. In the forest, announced Jack. Everybody reads. That night, Jack read Jim his first story. The two friends had no idea that someone was secretly listening. Later, Norbert told his mother about Jack's stories. Perhaps the blackbird isn't so bad after all, said Norbert's mother. Why don't we go and visit him? She told her friends at the market about the stories and about their visit. Martha and Melissa decided to go and meet Jack for themselves as well. In that evening, as Jack read to Jim, a group of seagulls quietly approached the little wooden house. Jack had a fine, clear voice. You hear them listening out the window to the story. There's a lot of them. Every day new visitors came, bearing gifts of flowers, fresh bread, and marmalade. Everyone wanted to meet Jack. Now the seagulls greeted Jack with a big smile when they saw him in the village. This made Jack happy. From then on, he read funny stories that made Jim laugh. And all his new neighbors laughed too. The end. So if we think about Jack's adventure, it must have been sad at first to not be accepted by the people of the village. And there's an old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And that means that you shouldn't try to figure out what's inside the book or what's inside a person just by looking at them. You need a chance to open the book and read it or get to know the person before you can judge what kind of person they are, whether they'd make a good friend or not. And to remember that God created each of us differently. It would be pretty boring if we all looked the same and liked the same things. And so as you are going into life, making new friends, maybe as you head back to school, remember that what's on the inside is hard to figure out if you're just looking at the outside. So I hope you enjoy your week, and there are some activities that will be linked to the book in our craft links for this lesson. Have a great day.